Welcome back. Today I'm going to be going over this SAT system of equations question. And once again, thanks to Aniko.ai for providing this specific question in their free resources tab. But before I dive into the explanation, please just give this a try yourself. Okay, so here we have a pair of equations where m and n are constants, and we're told that these lines here, right, uh, are perpendicular lines. Okay, so the system of equations has perpendicular lines. Which choice of the following pairs of equations also represents a pair of perpendicular lines? So right away, right, what are we given? We're given that these are perpendicular lines. And just to kind of highlight that, right, I'm going to use that perpendicular symbol, right? But anytime you have linear equations, and if the system, right, has perpendicular lines, it means that the slopes have to be opposite and reciprocals, right? Let's say you had a standard form of an equation, of a linear equation, right? Ax plus by equals c. What would be the slope here? Well, if you put it in y equals mx plus b form, you'll realize that the slope here is negative a over b. So the slope of any linear equation, right, is negative a over b if it's in the standard form. Why is that important? Because instead of having to solve each one and, putting it in slope-intercept form, like y equals mx plus b, it's easier just to, use that formula kind of, right? So what is the slope of this first linear equation here? If you do negative a over b, well, a is 15, b is negative 26, right? So what's negative a over b? Well, it's going to be negative 15, right, over negative 26. That's just 15 over 26. So the slope of this first equation is 15 over 26. What about the second one? Well, remember I told you, because we know these are perpendicular lines, right? They have opposite and reciprocal slopes. I'm just going to use an abbreviation, right? So that means if the slope of the first line was 15 over 26, then the slope of the second line, and I'll use a different color for this, is going to be opposite. So that's going to be negative 15 over 26, and then reciprocal. So you flip it, right? And again, this is for any perpendicular pair of lines. So the slope of the second equation is negative 26 over 15. Well, why is that important to know? Well, because now you have these constants m and n, and you can represent them uh, with the slope value. What I mean by that is, well, if negative 26 over 15 is a slope, right? Well, what is the slope formula? We just learned it was negative a over b, right, for equations in standard form. Well, negative a over b in this case, right, m is a and n is b, right? So it's going to be negative m over n. And of course, just a bit of manipulation, right? You get that m over n equals 26 over 15. And of course, that n over m, right, if you flip those, is equal to 15 over 26. So we're left with this ratio. Now, you'll actually realize that's incredibly helpful for this problem, because since you're trying to find which one of these pairs of equations are perpendicular lines, well, you can use the fact that n over m equals 15 over 26, right? Because you know a value, right? 15 over 26, and if you know n over m, well, then you also know m over n, you know negative m over n, and likewise. So let's look at the first answer choice here, right? Apply the same logic, right? If the slope is negative a over b, right, which we found, earlier with this formula. I would memorize this, by the way, right? So you don't have to recall it. I mean, you could, but I would memorize it. Negative a over b. Well, in this case, right, negative a over b is negative 26 over 15. And what about for this second part, negative a over b, that's negative n over m. So on one hand, we have negative 26 over 15. What is negative n over m equal to? What value? Well, this is where this comes in, right? If n over m is 15 over 26, then negative n over m, well, it's just negative 15 over 26. So then my question to you is, are those perpendicular slopes? And you should say no, right? Because these are not opposite and reciprocal. They're reciprocal, right? But they're not opposite. So answer choice A can't be our pair of our perpendicular lines. Let's move on to answer choice B. 26 over 15, right? Same thing. The slope is negative 26 over 15. Right? And you can use previous answer choice calculations to help you get them faster, right? For testing for future ones. So negative 26 over 15. All right, what's the slope here for the second one? Well, right, if n is a, and if negative m is b, well then it's going to be negative n, or negative a over b. Well, that's just equal to n over m. And we know that n over m is equal to 15 over 26. So now, are these perpendicular slopes? Well, yeah, right? You should say they are, because these are reciprocal and these are opposite. So you know that these are going to be a pair of perpendicular lines. And therefore, answer choice B is the correct answer. I could always test these future ones, but right, if you're taking the SAT, you should be fast as possible. So I would encourage you, if you're really confident, circle the answer, just go. But just to recap for this problem, right? The most important thing to recognize is the formula for the slope, right? Negative a over b. And once you do that, well, it's really just plugging in that formula into every one of these equations, right? Even the answer choices, to figure out which ones are going to be perpendicular slopes, right? So I hope that made sense. If it didn't, right, please leave any questions you have down in the comments. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.